There's not only beer in that keg. There's beer and blood. Blood of men.
You ain't changed a bit. Besides, your hands ain't so clean. You killed and liked it. You didn't get them medals by holding hands with them Germans.
Cinematic fantastic.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Bitten by a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
If you wanted something to do in between seasons,
when you're missing us dearly and life feels uneven,
we'll stop on by and give you a lift. Brought you a present.
You brought you a gift.
This is a bonus episode, a little bit different from the ones you know.
4 theme movies in a row. Welcome to the bonus. Thankful that you joined us. Now here's the bonus episode. Good morning, I guess, listeners, wherever you are. It is Cinematic Fantastic time. And I will say, everyone out in the audience, everyone has some sort of enemy, some sort of, school bully. Maybe it's the guy at work. Maybe it's even your boss. Don't tell your boss.
Yeah.
Maybe it's gotta be even your childhood crush, who you eventually started to work on a relationship with, became your girlfriend and everything, but you just hate her.
She rejected.
Betty just is the worst person to live with.
Betty rejected you. Betty eventually rejected you. You gave her your heart.
You've got an enemy, and I've got an enemy. It's not Dad. Dad's got an enemy. It's not me.
Facts.
Everyone's got their own individual enemies, but did you know that there is an enemy whom everyone has in common? Everyone, even everyone.
Society.
Enemy. The public enemy.
Yes.
And that is our fellow Tom Powers in the movie, The Public Enemy, 1931.
Yes.
Starting on a strong foot in our gangster paradise, for lack of a better word. Our gangster crusade. Our crusade through the gangster movies we're beginning here.
I thought we were going to call it Golden Gangsters because we are pulling from the golden age of Hollywood, not only from the 1930s, but we've also got one that kind of creeps in from the 40s and says, I'm here too. So again, if you guys remember, we did a bonus.
For those who know they're Italian and enthusiasts of gangsters who know they're Italian, the word largo in Italian would be, as well as it is in music, slow. Just to boil it down.
It means slow.
Really slow.
Yeah.
So I guess it was slow on the playfield.
Well, that movie he's talking about is Key Largo, and that's also a location in Florida, I believe. I think there's something that comes up with that, with the storm in Florida. But that's okay. So let's start this off in saying that this is a bonus month, just like we did our last time. We did cinematic classics. We did M. We did Night of the Hunter. We did Citizen Kane, and we did Treasure of Sierra Madre. We are doing another bonus month that consists of 4 movies, kind of keeping them in a subject matter. And that subject matter is crime, punishment, gangsters, and mobsters. The first movie is The Public Enemy, 1931, starring the absolutely excellent James Cagney, Jimmy Cagney himself.
Rather, he was likely the inventor of that gangster voice. Though, honestly, in this movie, he is so early that he is just smug teenager to me. He doesn't sound at all like the, see? He doesn't sound like that at all.
Well, he plays both.
Much.
Well, the voice kind of develops over time in a lot of his different characters. A lot of the things that we see as cliche with those gangster and mobster kind of roles were started with these movies like Little Caesar. It's not the pizza company. It's actually about a mobster played by Edward G. Robinson. Let me get his name right. these characters are so well ingrained as in the American psyche that when you think of gangsters, you're probably thinking of these kind of movies. But to be honest, we're thinking that, hundreds of these movies were made. No, actually, it was actually around less than 24, I think. I think it was a good handful of these movies were made, and they had their heyday, and then they kind of, to just be honest, they kind of faded off the scene a little bit. And I think that as the 1940s kind of came in and kicked in, you saw less of those movies, and you saw more of, I think,
for
when
good reason, these were very...
World War II was hitting.
And for good reason, these are very violent movies. As
they are.
They're dealing with people who are corrupt and not on the good side, or at least aren't supposed to be. But we'll talk about why that stigma is sort of different when you get into them a little bit later. Thirdly, overall, as gangsters were really representative of the lower class.
Yep.
Especially during the Great Depression, when everyone was lower class, basically. To sum it all up, everyone was lower class. But when there was more prosperity, especially when World War II ended and New Deal came and went, the America got a lot more prosperous of a country, and since there weren't any more really big wars to deal with, since the Cold War was, cold, there wasn't much expenditure, at least relative to World War II.
Right. It wasn't popping off.
As they went on, that gangster culture, I believe, faded from all of those elements. And especially as, speak about culture changed from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s, 50s to the 60s, and, what gangsters looked like, especially on screen with Technicolor, rapidly changed and grew to something entirely different. And especially as later on, when movies got more capable of showing greater, more gritty experiences, and especially with color come those gritty experiences, it's entirely different from this golden age of gangster movies.
You got movies later on. Of course, we won't do these movies because they're a little bit out of our range here. But movies like Godfather Part 1 and 2, the remake of Scarface that got done with Al Pacino, and they didn't have to apologize or kind of steer you away from how you're supposed to see these characters. I mean,
and
they
just
did
honestly to retrospect over the 30s and 40s.
Yeah,
it's definitely very different and alien, but at the same time, it's just got this mood that is just warm. 30s movies are just something different from, you've got Avengers, and you've got what's another good one? I didn't know that there's a relatively recent unveiling was Ryan Reynolds, who he does all those commercials for Mint Mobile. He is doing a movie about imaginary friends, them being real and people starting to see them.
I saw that. Yeah,
it's sort of similar to, if you've seen the I believe it's Cartoon Network. It's Foster's Home for Imaginary Kids.
Home, yeah.
It was a little series where there was this little dude, and he had a blob. There was this he was sort of monstrous, but it's not like he had horns. I don't know really how to describe him.
So what are you saying about modern stuff as opposed to 30s?
Yeah, just 30s movies have that, especially as we've talked about the transatlantic accent and how that sort of went away. Just, this atmosphere that they always had, the limitations, it just feels like this bottle of that. That's why we really like these Universal monster movies, is just how it's a little bit hard to encapsulate into words, but encapsulation it certainly was. Compared to modern media, and there's just something to enjoy about, the style of them.
Yes. One thing I would say about the Public Enemy, though, it is pre-code. So they have to, not they have to, but they felt like they had to put, something at the front and at the end a little message to the audience. What did it say at the very beginning? It says, "It is the ambition of the authors of The Public Enemy to honestly depict an environment that exists today in a certain strata of American life." Yada yada. No.
Yes, and fear from the public, adopting the behaviorisms of the gangster, as he was sort of this hero in many of the movies that gangsters were in.
He's a rebel. He's the ultimate rebel.
You see our protagonist rise from the
rags to riches in many
from the lower class, and then assuming this, this lifestyle, like you've got the cars, you've got the ladies, especially with gangster movies, they were objects of status, which yikes, but still they had assets, and it was a sort of way of achieving that American dream that
albeit going a dark path to do it.
The people who can't make that much money sort of going like anyone could force his way, fight his way to glory, to the top, to seeing all the people in their Fords and their Manors and their, speakeasies roaring with music and laughter and wine, becoming this immortal, larger-than-life position.
Here's the thing. You're saying that they are, scrabbling and clawing their way to the top, whatever means necessary, even criminal ones. There's a scene in The Public Enemy where Tom Powers and some of his compatriots go into a kind of a swanky establishment. They put on airs because they're lower class, but they're trying to act upper class, and it comes across as a little weird, like they don't belong there. But it's almost like no matter how much success you get, you're still that lower middle class guy from that borough of Chicago or New York or wherever they were from, and you can't really shake that.
And oftentimes, many rich people who get it for rational reasons. They get it for, they justifiably, they lived a moral life and they got a job. They became, rich. They had a family. They accrued their life, morally. Those people, it's hard to compare to these people who they clawed their way up. They're not as perfect as those actual real higher class citizens, because they actually got there through dark means, and they slaughtered their way to the top. They are, murderers. They are thieves.
If they didn't murder, they had somebody else murder for them.
They have hardness in their hearts, and we haven't talked about rival gangs. Gangsters would often get into various contentions with rival gangs. They get into a whole war. People would go down in the fight.
Yep.
And especially this wasn't helped because of their compadre for each other. They were gangsters are very loyal to their other gang members and to the gang and their cause. Later in this film, spoilers, when one of our main characters, Mike Powers, I believe, he goes down in an epic gang war, and he has to avenge him for, the cause of his gang.
Oh, I think Mike. Wait, you're talking about Matt? You're talking about Matt Doyle, right?
I might be talking. Yeah, no, Mike got killed, but he wasn't his compadre as much as. But still, vengeance was necessary to further the cause of the gang and to come out on top. And Tom Powers went down.
Yeah. The other thing is that you get so proud. It has to be eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and it keeps going back and forth until everybody's dead. I mean, you can't operate a business that way.
Yeah, vengeance never wins.
No, it doesn't.
And that's just the sort of fascinating thing about gangster movies is that rise and then that fall.
That ultimate
You've always got to have that fall because, of course,
they want to show that they're going down.
They want to show that these aren't good people and that they get their just desserts at the end.
Right, but that's the hallmark of some of these 30s gangster movies is that there would be a fall. Or to give another movie that Jimmy Cagney was a gangster in, it was Angels with Dirty Faces. And the very end of the movie, he's going down, and he's just like, they're not going to take me. I'm not going to wuss out or whatever. And his priest friend is like, look, you don't go down like that because all the kids see you as a hero. Go the coward's way out, and you kind of cry for your beg for your life. That they'll see you as, hey, maybe this is not the way to go. And see, that's the thing, is they kind of they have to show you this is not the way to go. But later on they don't do that.
That's the thing that's fascinating. Is that even still they get the riches, they get they get ladies, they get everything they could ever dream of, yet at the same time as you're holding your girl by your side at the gala, at the same time you're holding a gun behind your back and fending off against 25 other dudes who are trying to end your life.
Yeah, they're not going to do it yet. They'll be on the other side of the room, and they'll be like, nod at you, and you're like, okay. And so and you hear, hey, I better be careful because someone's going to...
You can never avoid your fate.
Yeah, and that's kind of what that's about.
So I guess that is an extensive review at what makes gangster movies so fascinating.
And each one of them that I would consider really great have at their core, something that makes it special. Even if you I've heard somebody said, hey, the Public Enemy would be a better movie if they would remove the little part at the beginning and the part at the end that talk about, basically, we don't glorify the lifestyle of the gangster and, he's a public menace or whatever.
So my review of the movie was fine. The only thing I would have taken out not taken out necessarily, the end part was it ran quite a bit ways long because he got, at the end of the movie, Tom Powers is injured and he is in the hospital, but eventually the gang catches up to him and then they steal him away from the hospital and they do not play nicely with him and then they end up delivering him dead on his doorstep.
Well, I thought that was a suspenseful thought because what's coming. You're like, and the mother, Tom Powers' mother, they show a lot of his family life. They show the two sides of him, not only as a son and a brother, but also, in the gangster world.
It's very personal because, we have the gangster who's fighting among, even his closest companions. In this case, his brother went out to war and he came back and he got... everything that he wanted, but he had to claw his way up.
Yeah, we're both murderers. You just, they just give you medals for it. And me, I just, you're looking down on me, but you killed them just like I'm killing people now. We're not any different. And that's kind of an interesting way of putting it, And then also among his mother, his relationship with his mother, his family, and then also with, I believe his enemy, Nails Nathan, and then Putty Nose, who is sort of his... or was his ally, but then he betrays him. Well, he betrayed him early on in his career. See, that's one of the things. He could have just let Putty know. He saw Putty Nose across the room after Tom Powers had made it big, right? He saw Putty Nose. You can't let those things stand. He couldn't just let it stand, and then you just got to go get that guy and go kill him. And then it shows his heart, his pride, his arrogance. He can't let a slight... go. He has to hold those grudges, blood for blood. That's just how it goes. I don't know. I guess
another thing that truly makes a gangster movie and a movie that we wanted to do in particular was grapefruits. Now I'll tell you why. In our Frankenstein episode that we did on the movie Frankenstein, we talked about Mae Clark, who was one of the actors in that movie, and you told me, what did you tell me?
I said that there was a movie that Mae Clark was going to do later, or no, she did it same year, I think. And it was called The Public Enemy, and has James Cagney, and she's his girlfriend for like all of like 5 minutes. And there's a scene where, and here the rumor is that Mae Clarke and James Cagney, she thought that they were doing the grapefruit scene just for the crew as a joke. But William Wellman, the director, left it in. He put it in the movie. And so she was shocked that it got put in the movie. But it's one of the most famous scenes. He shoves half a grapefruit in her face for her saying, something to him.
Yeah, well, wearing pajamas. He's got this pajama shirt.
Right. The rumor is, though, that the ex-husband of Mae Clarke, who they didn't end up very well, as divorces often do, and he supposedly would pay money to just go see that movie, and he would wait for that scene where she gets smashed in the face with the grapefruit, and then he would laugh and leave.
There are various different stories on the origin of this. The director, for instance, said that this was entirely secret from Mae Clarke,
right,
while James Cagney said that he had notified her beforehand.
Right, and then she thought it was just going to be for the crew, and to act that part out, but it ended up being the movie.
Regardless, half of a grapefruit got smashed into her face, and I believe the story behind the grapefruit was that the director's wife loved to eat grapefruit for breakfast, so he wanted emotion out of that scene. He was like, what better emotion would my wife's favorite breakfast item to be shoved into the protagonist's wife's face.
Or girlfriend.
Girlfriend, yeah. Sorry.
Right. He's not one to marry that, Tom Powers.
Desecrating the precious, sacred grapefruit.
Yes.
Which, honestly, I don't even get why grapefruit exists. Like, oranges entirely replace grapefruit.
Grapefruit has some stuff in it that orange just can't top. You'll have to look. It's vitamins. It's way better. Now, I don't like the taste of grapefruit. It's a little too sour for me. It's a little too tangy.
So tell me more about James Cagney and the production of this movie.
All right. Well, why? Of course I will. The first thing to mention specifically about this movie was directed by William Wellman. They based it off of the screenwriter based it off an unpublished book by two people. The book was going to be called Beer and Blood. They had seen some of a famous gangster named Al Capone's murderous gang rivalries in Chicago, and so that's what they were going to base it on.
Yeah, Al Capone, none of you guys knew, he was the real-life Scarface from the movie Scarface.
Right, and he got in an accident, well, not an accident. Well, someone came after him with a. I heard that it was a bayonet. It was a bayonet blade. I heard that he was in World War I, and he came back from there, and that's where he got the Scarface. I don't know. I thought it would.
Might have been just some conflict in a pub, but just like Tom Powers, he was a notorious gangster, brushing heads with rival gangs and dominating the prohibition racket business.
He didn't really like the nickname Scarface as much of another one called. He was called Snorky. Snorky.
Okay, Scarface. that has bite to it. That's awesome.
Snorky is kind of stupid. I think maybe he didn't want to be reminded that he had a facial disfigurement. But I'm telling you, scars kind of make you look bad and make you look like you're like, don't mess with me.
It's like you get a strike in the jugular and survived.
Right. Somebody came after me, but I lived, that kind of thing, and I got this this scar.
It's just metal.
It is kind of metal.
His story. He grew up in Brooklyn into a poor family immigrating from Italy. Al Capone reveled in attention. He adored when he hit a home run in baseball, and the crowds went wild for him.
Because he would actually, he'd come out to the baseball diamond, and they would, and he'd throw a ball, and he'd hit it. He'd also sign autographs.
And he also had a flower shop. I believe he also did a soup kitchen for the Great Depression.
Oh,
when
that's nice.
All sorts of people were starving. He would feed all the hungry people who streamed in from down the block. Lines from down the block those days.
Yeah, that's very nice, William. But you know what he would also do, William? If you just barely crossed him, he would beat you over the head with that baseball bat. So
Yeah, he punched his teacher in school and he got expelled for it. He got expelled because he punched his teacher. And she was like,
that's not bad.
You're going to the principal's office to get expelled. So after he climbed the ranks of kid gangs, he joined the 5 Point Gang, doing work as a bouncer. He was the bodyguard, and he, at that time, also obtained respect from his mentor, the great Johnny Torrio. He was later the forerunner of of Al Capone's crime syndicate, the Chicago Outfit, which is funny because his mentor turns into his subordinate, his coworker. And
yes,
I find that interesting. His great empire fell one Valentine's Day, 1929. It was called the Valentine's Day Massacre, which it doesn't sound like a massacre too much to me because 7 members of their rival gang, the North Side Gang, they're dead. They're lined up against the wall, killed. They took a photo of it, actually. I wouldn't recommend seeing it, but it's on the Wikipedia page if you do want to see it. But yeah, that started a gang war, and it made Al Capone public enemy number 1. So in other words, he was also the public enemy. And
there you go.
Scarface. And I guess he was Key Largo? I don't know, somewhere?
No.
It connects to basically all of our movies. I mean, it works.
But the thing is, though, the more visible that you make yourself, with these crimes, it puts you a target on your back with the newly formed FBI,
as the gang wars are happening, not long after, the feds caught him for 22 counts of tax evasion. Interestingly enough,
they couldn't get him for other stuff because he would
where he went to 12 years in prison. He was actually one of the first to go to Alcatraz, which is interesting.
That's
because
true.
Alcatraz was recently built. He was one of the first to go there. He deteriorated from paresis in his estate after he was released for, paresis, until the end of his life. And paresis it's basically his nervous system went.
Yes, but also he did also have syphilis as well. Syphilis is a
the paresis is a part of the syphilis.
Okay, yeah.
That is to say, rather, that he was in the later stage of it where it was just his brain was his psychiatrist said he had the brain of a 12-year-old when he was being judged to be released from prison.
Yes, and they based a lot of the things that happen in real life.
Yeah,
on
so I find
these
it interesting that he rises from the kid gangs. He starts into the prohibition racketing. He becomes
the muscle of another guy,
dominating all over the bars. He then gets into a really bad massacre, then gets put into a hospital, and then where he soon dies afterwards out of there into his estate.
There are some parallels. There's some parallels to be had.
But he was the real public enemy. He was the real Scarface. And when we get to the actual movie Scarface, we'll probably mention him again.
Yeah, we'll mention some of the parallels and things that they took from Al Capone's life. Specifically, the interesting thing about this movie, and specifically about James Cagney, is he's more multifaceted than I think than the gangster genre would have you believe with him. One of his first things that he ever did was he was in a movie called Every Sailor, or not, I don't know if it was a movie, it was a stage review, and it had one little dance move, and he knew it inside and out. He only knew one good dance move, but he watched other people do their dance moves, and he could do it immediately. He's a dancer.
He was the Taskmaster.
No, yeah, from Marvel Comics. So no, but the thing about James Cagney is, and we saw a movie recently, William, didn't we? Man of a Thousand Faces, and we saw he's really talented with kind of tap dancing and everything. He could do all that. He could choreograph. He could do all those things. But what he started happening is he started getting these roles where he wasn't quite the shiny character. He was interesting to watch. So much charisma. You know, even with characters that you would say are kind of on the bad side of things, the charisma makes you root for this guy. Even when he's at his worst, you're still like, I hope he, figures this out and maybe survives.
Because he's just so smug about everything.
But he's strangely enough, even when he's doing horrible stuff, he's still likable because James Cagney still puts that in his characters. The thing about this, though, he is very well connected with the gangster genre. When you think of Jimmy Cagney, you think of like,
you probably also think of like Little Caesar as well. Was he in Little Caesar?
He wasn't, but Edward G. Robinson was. But
this movie and Little Caesar were the establishers of the gangster movies. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was in Little Caesar as well.
No. The other guy that's in Little Caesar, I believe. What is it? It's not Errol Flynn, is it?
If it was Errol Flynn,
it's another guy.
Your Robin Hood. Your Robin Hood is the criminal. Okay, I would be very surprised.
No, it's not Robin Hood. It's the guy who played Zorro. It's Douglas Fairbanks Jr., also another guy who was well known for swashbuckling. But we'll get into that when we talk about that. So he got a little bit typecasted. We've talked about Bela Lugosi. We've talked about Boris Karloff and how they got kind of typecasted with certain horror roles or different at certain parts. And they tried to kind of get away from those things, and sometimes they just kind of went, okay, I'll just lean into it.
James Cagney got stuck in the gangster movies until, the 50s when he did, A Man of a Thousand Faces and such.
Well, I mean, he started moving away from that. He got nominated a couple times for Academy Awards, and even won one for a movie called Yankee Doodle Dandy, which is about a composer named George Cohan, who wrote the song, the one that goes, I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy.
So I guess he really made it with biography style
yeah,
movies.
with musicals, yeah. But Man of a Thousand Faces, though, wasn't as, it was okay at the box office, but it wasn't like the big hit he wanted it to be. I thought it was a good movie, but that's because it made me think about Lon Chaney and all the things he did. That's why I connected with that movie. But back to this. So when James Cagney was getting pulled into doing The Public Enemy, he was actually going to play the Matt Doyle character. And Matt Doyle, the guy who played Matt Doyle, Edward Woods, he was going to play Tom Powers. But when they saw them act off each other, they're like, no, he needs to be Tom Powers. And it worked out so much better. I'm glad they did it that way, to be honest. And of course, people remember Edward Woods for other things. He's not Ed Woods. That's Ed Woods Jr. That's a different guy. That's the director who made really bad, movies. Well, infamous for bad movies, whatever.
An interesting thing that I saw was that apparently this film was to be bookended by puppetry, like puppet gangsters into flashy the public. That would have been very unique, as we had not seen that, let alone puppets.
I think the imagery though, is interesting.
We haven't even seen stop motion in the intro cards. That would be great.
But aren't they? They're puppets. If you think about it, someone else is pulling their strings. Their hubris, their selfishness, their arrogance, something deeper is pulling their strings, and they're just going through the motions. That is
interesting.
That could be an interesting way of looking at it, but I'm glad it was the way it was.
Instead, they had to go with the, oh shoot, what did they do? They did a bell or something? Did they show a printing press? I don't remember what it was.
So, yeah, it was something like that at the very end. Of course, you've got.
What about the press? What did the press think of this movie? Because I feel like it could go very wrong or very right at the same time, because they tried their best to make it more acceptable to the public, but then how did the public receive it? That's what I'm interested in.
Okay, the modern reception of this movie is much more favorable than I think the reception at the time, because they were saying, it's got some good performances, the story is okay, and I think that people back in the 30s, they were a lot harsher, I think, on some of the movies that I thought were good, because we see how good they are over time. We see them pass that test of time and become classics, right? But at the time, they weren't classics. They were just movies, and people just said whatever they said about things. And then, it was a mixed reception.
Yeah, I thought it was an okay movie. The only thing that I was craving for was stakes, because as they're called gangsters, as in they have a gang. This is about a guy fighting like another guy, and then maybe he has some lackeys, I guess, that come in the scene to help out. But I think that they didn't really do that well at representing an entire gang. I get the personal side of showing the personal, battles and the personal villain and protagonist that you have in this movie, but I feel like if it's a gangster movie, that you should see more of a accruement of a gang.
Well, I mean, I did see some gangsters, but they started getting popped off one by one.
Similarly to a heist movie where you love to see the accruement of a plan.
Oh, this is not. You mentioned that while we were watching. You were like, you wanted to see a heist. But
I
I'll
know,
tell you this
but
right
I'm
now, this
saying
is not a
what's
heist
good
movie.
about heist movies.
Yeah.
Is the plan, is seeing, you've got the bodyguard, you got the smart guy, you accrue all the assets, you make a plan, and then you invade into this place. But and then this plan just slowly starts to crumble. Like, the villains start to catch on. Maybe there's, all sorts of incidents that go slightly wrong, and then it just starts to fall apart. And then you've just got to book it at the end. Or it could probably... It should... Plan B.
Or they adapt and pull it off, and
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what's good about
you're amazed
heist
at
movies.
the magic. Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I want to see out of a good heist movie. The only heist movies I can think about that I have seen is The Bad Guys, which is DreamWorks, and probably that one scene from the Lego Movie where they're raiding into Lord Business's robot lair.
Well, we're talking about a good heist movie. I'd probably have said, the original Ocean's 11.
But I'm
how much
seeing,
did you
the stakes? Seeing more of a stakes. You're accruing more gang members. You're getting into this big, massive amount of gang, and then they get into this all-out war.
Well, the stakes are his life. I mean, his life. Also, he doesn't want his mom finding out all the stuff he's doing.
Yeah, the stakes are him and his family members. I get that, and it's still a great movie, but it's just seeing that it's called a gangster movie for a reason. And that's sort of what I think about.
Did you want the gang to be filled out a little bit more? I thought the focus was on his character. And
because there wasn't as much stakes, it felt like slower of a movie. Because while he does, accrue in fame, and he gets the lady, and he gets into cafes and such, it could go bigger, just to grow even bigger from that point. And then it would have, felt like it was ramping up steadily throughout the runtime. And it's a more shallow curve when there's less stakes, in my opinion.
I thought the stakes were fine. They were just more personal stakes. They're more, and to me, sometimes those more personal stakes I can relate to more, because you can make things bigger and bigger and bigger until it goes, okay, the city's going to blow up, big deal. How it affects somebody, their personal relationships, is sometimes those are the things that are really crucial and critical. Most of the things that go on in my life that are the most important are my family and my friends.
Which is even still, if they were aiming for that, they could have done. They could have always done better.
No, I'm sure they could have, but I thought that maybe those bigger stakes or those that can come into play when they have bigger budgets as well. They can have.
This probably didn't have that great of a budget. What was the budget, by the way?
I do not remember, but I do remember this. The budget was not that much. It was a decent amount, but the movie made like 3 or 4 times their budget, so they definitely made a profit. So I wanted to ask you a question. how much research, you did some research into Al Capone. How much research did you do on Prohibition, which is what this movie takes place at during the time of?
Not way too much. It was honestly really just Al Capone. I remember something about there's like this purple gang, but I don't know if that was all like at
that
time.
That was Detroit. Yeah, the gang that ran Detroit was the Purple Gang.
Well, I didn't look into that one. I didn't think it was timely enough, or wasn't even the same area.
Prohibition started in the late 1800s. There was a movement called the Temperance Movement. It had a good heart to it, I thought, but kind of went a little crazy with it. Their thought process was that Americans were drinking too much. There were actually women's groups that were allied with that. They had
and it was also probably expensive to make, as you have to have these sit in a brewery for such a long time.
It wasn't. Actually, they didn't have any problem with brewing it and creating
but especially like stewing wines can take years.
That's true. But the issue was, well, okay, let's put it this way. There were taxes on alcohol, and the government was making money off of people buying beer and alcohol and things like that. So when this temperance movement came through, not just women's groups, some people that were kind of high up in politics that were kind of pushing this too, and they were coming, I guess, more from a conservative kind of background as well. People like Carrie Nation, she had actually had an axe. It's just this woman would travel from saloon to saloon and go in there and just bust open beer barrels with her axe. There was an Anti Saloon League led by a guy named Wayne Wheeler. They had propaganda too. They said they told the African American and black groups that alcohol was hurting their movement to have civil rights. They were telling the racist people that alcohol was going to turn black people crazy, and they were like, "Oh, no." And then the workers were told alcohol was a capitalist ploy to keep them subjugated. And then the factory owners were told that alcohol was making their workers lazy.
So a massive string of conspiracies within this prohibition.
But 40% of the government's annual revenue is alcohol. So what are they going to do? Well, the Anti Saloon League and Wayne Wheeler and all them, they suggested an income tax. They went, oh, well, we do it new income tax. That'll take care of that stuff. We can get, we can put a prohibition on alcohol. It started out that people were like, oh, well, hard alcohol, hard liquor like gin, rum, whiskey, all that kind of stuff
would probably be
bourbon.
Prohibited from import.
Yes, all that. But they said, oh, beer's okay, right? You're going to leave beer, right? And they went, sure. Nope, beer's gone too. And so they had something called the Volstead Act, and anything with a 0.5 alcohol level or above was out, and many of the beers were done. It became a constitutional amendment in 1917, which strangely enough was, that was right before the end of World War I. So what are you going to do? I mean, all the guys that were overseas...
Yeah, we're back from the war. Yay, let's drink up to...
And we can't, yeah. Exactly. It's one of the only crimes that you would even have, like, little old ladies breaking. Because they had people called bootlegging, which meant they would make moonshiners. It's like they'd make it out in the forest, or like these out-of-the-way places. They would make what's called bathtub gin. They would use alcohol and different chemicals. They make gin in a bathtub. Really good for you. So the government...
I saw someone who had done that to make like the spiked punch. Some people might know who I'm talking about, but I would not drink any of that. It is
not from
probably
a bathtub,
a teaspoon would take out a large cat. Probably.
Yes.
It would probably take out a bear, honestly.
Yeah, and there was different little loopholes in the law. Like there was one loophole that you could keep any alcohol you had before the prohibition. And so a bunch of people would hoarded it. And then they said that rabbis and priests, with Jewish and Catholic priests, they had communion wine, right? And they said, oh, it's okay to have communion wine. They were like, oh, I've got a lot of communion wine. And then you could just come over and say, come see the rabbi on the side, and maybe he might give you some communion wine. There was also a thing where there was a brick of dehydrated grape juice, and on the outside of the brick it said, "It's not alcoholic, and it's perfectly legal. But please do not dissolve the brick in a gallon of water. Don't place the liquid in a jug in the cupboard for 20 days because then it would turn into wine."
Don't spin around 10 times.
Yeah.
Don't you dare. Don't you dare spin around 10 times.
Yeah,
if you spin around 10 times, then I will find your grave and put you in it.
Oh, okay.
And then I will take that grave and then put it into Fortnite as a e-currency.
Exactly.
People will buy your grave and dance on it.
On the outside of the box, it said, "Don't do this or it'll make it alcoholic." And that was kind of like going, wink, wink, here's how you make it alcoholic.
Yeah, and that's interesting at all. But yeah, how did it end?
I'm telling you. So here's
how did it end? It went along like that for like a while, and then 28, 29, it just goes away. How does it happen?
Well, like the early 30s, or actually very shortly after this movie is set. I think. I think it came out in 31, but it's set in 20s. I don't know. You have to tell me later. But there was a bunch of prohibition agents, but not enough. There was only 1,500 of them to cover the whole country. That's like one agent for every 70,000 Americans, right? 12,000 miles of coastline. How are you going to deal with that? What are you going to do? During Prohibition, it made criminals, alcohol is a precious commodity. So the gangsters like, oh, well, we'll keep, control of that. And millions of Americans became outlaws because they'd only buy from them. What ended up really ending it was things like what you said before, the Valentine's Day Massacre, things like that. The things like it showed how far these criminals would go, the gang warfare, and it freaked people out.
And did that lead the government to give in?
Well, the Great Depression did it as well. After a decade of really good growth under 3 Republican presidents, the stock market plummets, right, and America is thrown into the grips of the Great Depression. So ended up everybody loses their job, and they go, the very time when you would want to take a drink, you can't.
And also, I feel like they could have gone, if they re-enabled that during the Depression, then it's a stored commodity because it hasn't been sold, but been made, then it would just uncap the bathtub, and then everyone go rushing in that hole.
Well, you get the 21st Amendment that repealed the earlier amendment, and then that allowed people to actually...
I think I might do further investigation on all the exact reasons, like when that happened, who was president, and what he thought, how that propagated. But...
Yeah, you shouldn't force your morals on somebody else who doesn't share them, and also don't tell Americans not to do something that's the one thing they'll probably definitely do.
Moral of the story, I guess, really is to live life where you don't have to have a caveat of a dark morality pit that you've hidden to keep your status. It just all crumbles when it just caves in.
I think honestly, America created this dark Robin Hood of the gangster. America created them, because if Prohibition didn't happen, there would have been something else they would have done. But I'm telling you, it's one of the big things that caused them to flourish.
and they're fun. Honestly, they're fun in a sort of way, but also
explain that, sir.
But also keeping in a historical perspective, going like, these anti-protagonists are not the sort of people you want to like identify with. Obviously, you don't want to become a gangster because you see a gangster.
They're watchable. They're super watchable. You may not want to pattern your life after the character, but you can sit there and watch what they're doing. When I was watching this, I was going, "Oh, please don't," and a lot, because I was going, "Tom, if you would just not do where you watch, where you're going."
Yeah, where you're going, you could have actually had sort of a life, and even talk about Al Capone. He could have gone on with a good life because he had a flower shop and a soup kitchen and all the good things he would do. If he kept on that side, then, he could have accrued a good life. But that did not end up happening.
No, it didn't.
So that's just sort of the moral story. And I believe this has been a thoughtful discussion. Have you?
Absolutely. I do recommend this movie. James Cagney is great in it.
But don't miss our next segment where we talk about the actual plot of this movie, because while we put a lot of, thought into the various concepts behind this movie and have been in the production, there is still a lot speaking about the actual plot analysis of the movie.
Yes, absolutely. And join us next time. We're going to talk about the plot of The Public Enemy, 1931.
Thanks for listening to Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. Click here and here for some more excellent content. Hope you'll enjoy it. See you soon.